You will see her opening the Gulf War with the first combat Tomahawks in history. You will see her reaching into low Earth orbit to kill a dying spy satellite with a single interceptor. You will see her standing between two nuclear powers in the Taiwan Strait, saying nothing, changing everything. Walk in. This is every mission of the Ticonderoga-class cruiser. In 1983, USS Ticonderoga, hull number CG-47, sailed into the Mediterranean as the world's first Aegis warship. Her defining feature was the SPY-1A phased array radar. Four fixed octagonal panels bolted to her superstructure, replacing the spinning dishes of every cruiser before her. She carried two Mark 26 twin-arm launchers for Standard Missile-2 missiles. She had a 5-inch Mark 45 deck gun forward and aft, and Harpoon anti-ship missiles amidships. Every sensor, every launcher, every weapon fed into a single computer network, the Aegis Combat System. It could track hundreds of contacts and engage a dozen simultaneously. She was not a ship with radar. She was a radar wearing a ship. When Ticonderoga sailed east that summer, the U.S. Marine barracks at Beirut had become the center of a slow-motion catastrophe. Syrian air defenses and Soviet-supplied fighters roamed the coast. Multiple air actors flew inside the same sky. There were Israeli, Syrian, Lebanese, and Iranian-backed elements all overlapping. The Navy needed a picture of that chaos in real time. Older cruisers rotated mechanical antennas one target at a time. Aegis promised to see all of it at once. Ticonderoga's first combat deployment was, in effect, a live-fire final exam for the entire concept. On station off the coast, Ticonderoga began queuing air defense missions for the entire Sixth Fleet. Her SPY-1A radar swept the sky at the speed of an electron. The SPY-1A is a passive electronically scanned array. Instead of one dish physically rotating, thousands of small transmit-receive elements fire in coordinated bursts. They steer a radar beam by phase alone. A new bearing can be sampled in microseconds. The effect is a shield of radio energy. To any target inside it, the ship appears to be watching from every angle at every moment. The system was reading Syrian MiG-23 fighters taking off from Lebanese border airfields. It caught them before the Israeli F-15s tasked with intercepting them could react. She was flagging Iranian-supplied surface-to-air launches within seconds of their radar warm-up. In December, U.S. Navy A-6 intruders and A-7 Corsairs went inland to strike Syrian anti-aircraft batteries. Ticonderoga was the ship holding the master air picture. She cued rescue frequencies and reserved her Standard Missile-2 rounds as a last resort umbrella over the strike package. 2 Navy aircraft were lost that day. Both crews were recovered under a sky Ticonderoga had mapped down to the meter. Aegis had not fired a shot. It had done something more important. It had proven that a single ship could outthink the entire electromagnetic battlefield around her. When she turned for home, the Navy ordered 26 more. The next test would not be a picture on a screen. It would be missiles in the air and a war that started at midnight. On January 17, 1991, at 02:30 local time, coalition forces opened Operation Desert Storm against Iraq. The plan called for a decapitating first strike on Baghdad's command bunkers, air defense radars, and presidential palaces before dawn. Manned aircraft would eventually do the bulk of the work. But the very first weapons across the border had to be blind, deaf, and unstoppable. That job fell to a new missile called the Tomahawk. It also fell to the Ticonderoga-class cruisers carrying it. The USS Bunker Hill, hull number CG-52, and USS San Jacinto, hull number CG-56, were positioned in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. Both were baseline 2 Ticonderogas. They were the first sub-variants fitted with the Mark 41 vertical launching system. That system is a grid of 61 silos forward and 61 aft. Each silo can fire a Tomahawk straight up on command. At 1 minute past 01:30, San Jacinto received the launch order for Iraqi target packages inland. Her vertical launching system cells opened in sequence. Vertical launching system firing is not a single event. It is a choreographed sequence of exhaust venting, hatch opening, booster ignition, and thermal management. Each cell must fire without cross-contamination of adjacent cells. A miscalculated exhaust path can backblast into a neighboring silo. That would cause a catastrophic loss of the ship. Tomahawks lifted off in orange columns of fire. They arced east and dropped low as their turbofan engines caught. San Jacinto was the first cruiser in history to fire a cruise missile in anger. Bunker Hill's launch orders came minutes later. Together, the two ships put dozens of Tomahawks into the air on that opening night. Those missiles flew for over an hour, navigating by terrain contour matching. They threaded through Iraqi radar coverage at 50 meters above the desert. They struck the Iraqi Air Force headquarters, the presidential palace, and key nodes of the Qari air defense network. By first light, Iraq's ability to coordinate an air response had been shredded. Coalition F-15s and F-117s were flying into a blinded country. The Tomahawk had proven itself. The Ticonderoga class had proven something else. The ship of the line, the vessel that trades broadsides with an enemy fleet, was now a launcher first and a combatant second. She could reach 800 miles inland without the fleet ever coming into range. But the same ship could do the opposite of Tomahawks. She could sit still, say nothing, and change the course of an entire region. In March 1996, the People's Liberation Army began the largest live-fire military exercise in its history off the coast of Taiwan. Ballistic missiles were arcing into the Taiwan Strait as warning shots. They were timed to the island's first free presidential election. Beijing wanted the vote to fail. Washington wanted the vote to happen. In between was a body of water 130 kilometers wide. The United States surged 2 carrier strike groups toward the strait. The USS Independence came from Japan. The USS Nimitz came from the Persian Gulf. The escorting screen included Ticonderoga-class cruisers USS Bunker Hill, hull number CG-52, and USS Port Royal, hull number CG-73. Port Royal was the newest baseline force ship in the fleet at the time. Port Royal took station east of Taiwan. Her SPY-1B radar reached out over 400 kilometers. She began tracking every DF-15 short-range ballistic missile the People's Liberation Army fired. She was not authorized to shoot. She was authorized to see. And she made sure Beijing knew she was seeing. Every launch, every impact, every simulated coastal assault was logged in real time. Data was pushed back through the Aegis network to Fleet Command in Yokosuka and Washington. People's Liberation Army rocket forces were operating under an assumption. They believed the United States had no persistent tracking of their inland launches. They were wrong. Every plume, every burn duration, every trajectory was inside a Ticonderoga's radar picture. At the same moment, Bunker Hill was cycling her Standard Missile-2 magazines to enhance warfare availability. Her Mark 41 cells were loaded with a mix of Standard missiles configured for high-altitude engagement. If a Chinese missile had strayed close to a U.S. carrier, she was postured to intercept in seconds. She never had to. By late March, the exercise ended. The vote in Taiwan went ahead. The Chinese leadership rewrote its entire doctrine on the U.S. Navy's ability to intervene in the region. That rewrite eventually became the anti-access, area denial concept that dominates modern Pacific strategy today. The Ticonderoga cruiser had not fired a single missile. 2 of them had bent an entire nation's strategic planning around their radar horizon. When she did fire, the target would not even be inside Earth's atmosphere. In February 2008, a 2,200-kilogram American reconnaissance satellite named USA-193 was tumbling in low Earth orbit. It carried a full tank of unspent hydrazine fuel. Re-entry was imminent. If the tank survived re-entry intact, it would rupture on impact. It would disperse toxic vapor across an area the size of 2 football fields. The Pentagon needed to shatter the satellite before it fell. There was no rocket on standby designed for the job. There was, however, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser in the Pacific. U.S. Lake Erie, hull number CG-70, was selected. She was Baseline 3 Aegis, upgraded to Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense 3.6. She carried the SPY-1B radar and a modified Standard Missile 3 Block 1A interceptor loaded in a single Mark 41 cell. The Standard Missile 3 is not an explosive warhead missile. It is a kinetic kill vehicle. The 3-stage rocket lofts a lightweight infrared-seeking projectile above the atmosphere. There, the projectile releases from its booster. It steers to a physical, body-to-body collision with the target. Closing speeds are above 10 kilometers per second. All of the energy of destruction comes from the impact itself. There is no fuse. There is no explosive. Only mass and geometry. On the night of February 20, 2008, Lake Erie loitered northwest of Hawaii. She held station inside the projected orbital plane. Sea state was rough. The launch window with the target satellite passing overhead lasted less than 30 seconds. Aegis had to calculate a firing solution against a satellite moving at 7.5 kilometers per second. Target altitude was 247 kilometers. The Mark 41 cell opened. The Standard Missile 3 lifted off. It threw its first stage in 7 seconds. It threw its second and third stages in the following minute. It coasted into space on the modified kill vehicle. The Seeker acquired the tumbling USA-193 while the projectile was still climbing. Impact came 3 minutes and 48 seconds after launch. Altitude was 247 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean. Ground telescopes recorded a bright momentary flash, then a cloud of expanding debris. Post-strike telemetry confirmed a direct kinetic hit through the fuel tank itself. The hydrazine burned off in the upper atmosphere within seconds. Lake Erie became the only surface warship in history to destroy a satellite. She had turned a ship defense radar and a ship defense missile into an anti-space weapon on 20 days of notice. Not every mission ends in flame. Some end in silence, escorting the most valuable ships on Earth through the most dangerous water on Earth. In March 2003, 5 U.S. Navy carriers began surging air power toward the Persian Gulf and the Eastern Mediterranean. The USS Constellation, USS Kitty Hawk, USS Abraham Lincoln, USS Theodore Roosevelt, and USS Harry S. Truman were moving into position. This was the opening of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Iraqi coastal defenses had Silkworm and Seersucker anti-ship missiles. Iranian small boat swarms threatened the Strait of Hormuz. Every carrier needed a shield ship. Ticonderoga-class cruisers were assigned that role for every Iraqi Freedom Carrier Strike Group. USS Mobile Bay, hull number CG-53, took Constellation. USS Cowpens, hull number CG-63, took Kitty Hawk. USS Valley Forge and USS Bunker Hill took the Persian Gulf carriers. In the Mediterranean, USS Anzio and USS Cape St. George escorted Roosevelt and Truman. On the opening night of the war, March 20, 2003, coordination was total. The cruisers fired Tomahawks at Iraqi command targets on precisely timed cues. Cowpens alone fired 39 Tomahawks in the first 72 hours. Cape St. George and Bunker Hill each cleared magazines above 30 missiles. The Ticonderoga fleet contributed a majority of the naval Tomahawk salvo that opened the war. But their more important job was invisible. Every carrier strike group depends on air defense integrity. Suppose an Iraqi Silkworm launched off the Al-Faw Peninsula, or suppose an Iranian F-4 Phantom pushed too close. The cruiser had to see it, classify it, and either destroy it or hand off to fighters within seconds. Aegis kept an unbroken track picture over the entire northern Gulf for the 21 days of major combat operations. Not a single U.S. carrier took battle damage during Iraqi freedom. Not a single aircraft was lost to an air defense engagement inside the cruiser umbrella. Every strike sortie from the carriers returned to a deck that Aegis had made safe. When Marines pushed north to Baghdad, the Ticonderoga fleet was the reason their close air support kept flying. The role was called escort. It was really something closer to conducting. Every jet in the sky, every helicopter over the beach, every Tomahawk from every ship was being sequenced against a threat picture built by cruiser radars. The carriers were the fists. The Ticonderogas were the spine. Not every enemy is a state. Sometimes she is asked to stand guard against a single, unpredictable neighbor across the sea. In 2017, North Korea test-fired 23 ballistic missiles across 17 separate events. Multiple flights overflew Japanese airspace. Tokyo activated its ballistic missile defense doctrine. The United States surged its Aegis ashore-capable ships into the Sea of Japan and the Western Pacific. The forward-deployed Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Shiloh, hull number CG-67, was homeported at Yokosuka. She went to ballistic missile defense standby. Shiloh was Baselane 3, upgraded through the Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense 4.0.1 software line. Her SPY-1B radar was tuned for the specific radar cross-section signature of Hwasong-class North Korean missiles. Her Mark 41 cells were split between 3 loadouts. She carried Standard Missile 2 Block 3B for air defense. She carried Standard Missile 3 Block 1B for exoatmospheric intercept. She carried Tomahawks for retaliatory strike. For most of 2017, Shiloh operated on a rolling patrol. She moved between the Tsushima Strait and the northern approaches to Tokyo Bay. Watch stations were doubled. Aegis modes rotated between search, discriminate, and engage. Every Hwasong launch from Sohae or Punggye-ri lit up Shiloh's radar within seconds of first stage ignition. Her operators had less than 5 minutes to classify, propagate, and offer engagement recommendations to Pacific Command. On August 29, 2017, a Hwasong-12 launched from Pyongyang. It overflew Hokkaido at an altitude of 550 kilometers. It impacted the Pacific past the Japanese home islands. Shiloh tracked it end to end. The engagement decision was held. Political rules of engagement did not authorize a live intercept over friendly territory, but the entire event was inside her fire control solution the whole way. If Tokyo had given the order, Shiloh was one keystroke from launching a Standard Missile-3. Behind the scenes, the same year, Shiloh also cycled through an internal command climate reset. She weathered a highly public Inspector General report on shipboard culture. The ship kept its ballistic missile defense posture through it all. She never came off station. She never dropped a track. By the end of 2017, Japan committed to acquiring its own Aegis-equipped destroyers. Tokyo also began studying Aegis ashore batteries for the home islands. A single forward-deployed Ticonderoga had, in effect, given an entire allied nation a template for its own missile defense. The class was aging, but the youngest missions were still to come, and the enemy was faster than any Aegis had ever tracked. By 2023, the strategic threat had shifted. Chinese DF-17 and Russian Avangard hypersonic glide vehicles could re-enter the atmosphere at above Mach 5. They could maneuver during descent. Traditional ballistic arc predictions no longer worked. The Aegis network, the same network born in a 1983 Ticonderoga, was being retrofitted for a target it was never designed for. The forward-deployed cruisers USS Antietam, hull number CG-54, and USS Chancellorsville, hull number CG-62, were among the first surface ships to trial the new sea-based Terminal Increment 3 software. They ran it against simulated hypersonic threats. The problem was fundamental. The ballistic missile flies a predictable parabolic arc. The hypersonic glide vehicle skips along the upper atmosphere. It changes bearing every few seconds. From the radar's point of view, it is not just fast. It is a target that refuses to hold still on any predicted line. Traditional track filters lose lock. New filters have to be adaptive. Each new detection has to rewrite the projected trajectory in real time. Antietam ran the trials off Guam in late 2022 and into 2023. Hearst PY-1A radar, the oldest variant in the fleet, was rebuilt in software. Aegis received a new track algorithm called adaptive discrimination. It could hold a maneuvering glider without losing count of the airliners and cargo ships also in her picture. Her Mark 41 cells were loaded with the Standard Missile-6 Dual 2. It was the first fielded U.S. missile with real capability against a maneuvering hypersonic terminal glide. In April 2023, Antietam demonstrated a live simulated intercept. The target profile represented a glide vehicle approach at Mach 7. Standard Missile-6 launched from Mark 41. Aegis handed off the terminal guidance in the final 6 seconds. The interceptor solved a body-to-body geometry problem no prior missile could have computed inside the closing window. It hit. The concept worked. Chancellorsville followed with similar trials in the South China Sea. She integrated with F-35 sensor feeds through Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air. For the first time, an F-35's onboard radar could cue a cruiser's missile in flight. Aegis was no longer just watching. It was letting the sky teach it what to shoot at. Both ships were, by then, on the retirement clock. Antietam decommissioned in 2024. Chancellorsville followed. But the software they proved lives on. It is inside the DDGX program. It is inside Japan's Maya class. It is inside the Aegis Ashore site in Poland. The oldest hulls in the fleet had written the doctrine for the next 50 years of naval missile defense. One last mission is left. Not against an enemy. Against time itself. The Navy planned to retire the entire Ticonderoga class by 2027. Then the Red Sea began burning. In late 2023, Iranian-backed Houthi forces began launching weapons from Yemen against commercial shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. They fired ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and one-way attack drones. Every merchant transit turned into a potential engagement. The Navy needed magazine depth, radar reach, and Tomahawk capacity in that water yesterday. The Ticonderogas that had been queued for scrap were pulled back. USS Philippine Sea, hull number CG-58, and USS Normandy, hull number CG-60, were among the first cruisers deployed into the Red Sea. They joined Operation Prosperity Guardian. They fought alongside Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. But they carried something the destroyers did not. They carried 122 vertical launch cells, more than any other surface combatant in the U.S. Navy. On multiple nights across late 2023 and 2024, the cruisers engaged waves of Houthi missiles and drones simultaneously. In a single January 2024 engagement, Philippine Sea's Aegis tracked 18 inbound threats over less than 10 minutes. Standard Missile 2 rounds, Standard Missile 6 rounds, and Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles fired in staggered volleys. Every threat was intercepted. The commercial convoy behind her sailed through untouched. Behind the missile duels, cruisers were also launching Tomahawks. In January 2024, USS Gravely, USS Mason, and Ticonderoga-class USS Philippine Sea participated in strikes against Houthi launch sites and radar nodes inside Yemen. It was the same weapon Bunker Hill had first fired at Baghdad 33 years earlier. This time, it was flying against a target the Iraqi war planners of 1991 could not have imagined. The class was aging. Fires had broken out on other cruisers under maintenance. Modernization budgets had been cut, restored, then cut again. And yet the ships that were supposed to be retired kept getting extended 6 months at a time. There was no other surface hull with the same magazine depth. The last of the class will finally leave service around the end of the decade. Their software, their doctrine, and their reputation are already inside every future Navy warship being built. The Ticonderoga's replacement, DDG-X, is essentially a modernized version of the same idea. A single hull carrying a single computer brain and enough missiles to see and shoot the whole battlespace at once. Every idea that shapes the future Navy started with a single ship in the Mediterranean in 1983. For 40 years, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser was the ship the fleet leaned on when the picture had to be perfect. She opened the Gulf War. She stopped a satellite from falling on a city. She stood between two nuclear-armed neighbors and refused to blink. Then, when a new kind of missile threatened everything, she stayed at sea long past her retirement date to hold the line one more time. If this story of the Ticonderoga-class cruiser rewired the way you see modern naval power, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every mission of every legendary weapon system, every episode, only here. See you at the next hull.